Hey guys, tonight we begin in the golden haze of a forgotten empire, where dust clings to your eyelashes and caravans groan under the weight of salt and gold. You're somewhere along the Sahel, in a world where maps are mostly guesses and wealth is measured in camel loads. There's the dry thud of drums in the distance, the scent of roasted dates in the wind, and a slow procession of traders too sleepy to argue over prices. You're in Mali. Not the modern nation, but the empire, the big one, the one whose borders stretched lazily from the Atlantic to the edge of the Sahara, just snoozing under the sun. It's the 13th century, and everything important takes forever. News travels by griot, gold is traded in blocks you could use as a pillow, and if you want to get from one city to another, you pack for weeks and hope your camel doesn't quit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your journey trudging slowly behind a caravan, your feet crunching on hot sand, the occasional clatter of a pot bouncing against a donkey's flank. You're not royalty, not yet. Just an extra pair of eyes in the immense and shifting landscape of West Africa, where kingdoms rise like mirages and sometimes disappear just as fast. Mali isn't even the first of its kind. Before it came the Ghana Empire. No, not modern Ghana, we're talking old Ghana, where kings wore collars of gold and taxed salt like it was fine wine. That kingdom had its moment in the sun before it quietly fell apart, like a tired tent collapsing in slow wind. From that dust rose Mali, forged by a man named Sundiata Keita, a warrior king with a limp and a destiny foretold by talking buffaloes, or so the griots claim. Now you're standing in the empire he left behind, watching merchants argue in Soninke, Mandinka, Arabic, and some other language that might just be whistling. Historians still argue whether Mali's borders were tightly controlled or just politely assumed, but no one doubts the flow of wealth through its veins. Gold, salt, ivory, cola nuts, and people, unfortunately. Asleep or awake, you can't ignore that trans-Saharan trade came with chains, too. You see wagons of goods being weighed in tiny scales that could tip over if someone sneezed too hard. In the heart of it all stands Niani. Yes, not Timbuktu, not yet. Niani is the sleepy capital, tucked between forest and river, a city whose name most of the world would forget, even though gold poured from its gates like water. You pass mud brick courtyards where chickens argue, and market stalls where women pile fish into pyramids more impressive than anything in Giza. Traders tally numbers on knotted strings, the original spreadsheets. Somewhere near the river, a griot recites the names of every king who ruled before, his voice rising and falling like a lullaby for the ancestors. And among these stories, quietly at first, you begin to hear the name Musa. At this point, Musa is just a boy, gangly, sun-darkened, and more interested in how boats float than how kingdoms run. He sits on the riverbank with his feet in the water, making reed models of ships while his tutors try in vain to get him to memorize boring legal codes. His family is powerful. His uncle or cousin, depending on how you count dynasties, is the king. But in an empire where dozens of relatives orbit the throne like sleepy planets, Musa is hardly seen as the obvious heir. He's clever, though. Curious. The kind of child who asks why gold is valuable if you can't eat it, and whether crocodiles can be trained to guard palaces. You watch him walk through the marketplace with a mango in one hand, poking at strange spices with the other. He listens more than he speaks. A child of privilege, but one who stares a bit too long at beggars and street performers. Someone cataloging the world in quiet little notebooks no one else sees. The empire around him is in a comfortable phase. Not too warlike, not too chaotic. Trade is flowing, the river is steady, and griots are running out of dramatic things to say. But Mali is also sitting on a secret, unimaginable wealth and gold, hidden away in riverbeds and mines deep in the southern forests. While Europe is fumbling through a slightly muddy high Middle Ages, Mali is quietly becoming the economic superpower of the known world. Only no one in Europe really knows it yet. You stretch out under a baobab tree as the day cools, watching a line of traders disappear over the horizon, each carrying a little piece of the empire's fortune.
Some wäre, a pot of millet porridge bubbles lazily.
This is a time when peace isn't just an ideal, it's the default state of the world, at least here, at least for now. A baby yawns in a sling, an old man mends a sandal with thread made of sinew, and a bird with feathers the color of sunset hops onto a rooftop and sings a note so pure it echoes in your chest. You're not entirely sure if you're awake anymore. But you're still with Musa. He's sketching something in the dirt, a map of the river maybe, or a dream of where the boats might one day go. He doesn't know it yet, but those little models he floats on the water are closer to prophecy than play. One day, he'll build an empire of movement, of pilgrimage, of architecture, of books that travel farther than any sword ever could. But for now, He's just a kid with river mud on his knees and stars in his eyes. Big. And big things tend to shift when you least expect it. You wake the next morning on a woven mat beside the Niger River.
It smells like Sylt and Sunrise.
The fog hasn't lifted yet, and you can hear distant birds arguing about who gets to sing first. The river hums with lazy power, winding like a slow sentence across the continent. And beside it sits young Musa, his feet still dangling in the water, now sketching something with a stick in the mud. You see him more clearly now, his skin tanned from the sun, his fingers calloused from climbing mango trees and grinding ink. He's maybe 10, maybe 12. Records from this time are less precise than your phone's alarm clock. What we know is this: Musa grew up watching the river carry everything. Boats, fish, news, dreams, and somewhere deep down, he started to wonder how far it could go. You follow him through his days, and they move like syrup. Morning lessons in Islamic law, which he finds interesting for about 6 minutes. Afternoons spent watching caravans arrive from the desert, their camels groaning and coughing like old men. Sometimes he climbs onto a rooftop just to watch the smoke rising from cooking fires across the city, wondering who all those people are and what they're eating for dinner. Historians still argue whether Musa was chosen early for leadership or if he simply became the best available option when things got weird. What we do know is that he was educated, not just in Arabic script and Quranic verses, but in geography, commerce, and storytelling. And that might be the most useful skill of all, because in a world where most people can't read, it's not facts that matter, it's the way you tell them. Your head starts to nod as you imagine Musa sitting at the feet of griots, those ancient West African bards who memorize more lines than most modern poets write in a lifetime. They chant histories, genealogies, myths, and jokes all braided into one long musical breath. Some of them exaggerate wildly. Others forget entire centuries. But Musa listens anyway, quietly learning what it means to rule people who think in stories. And while he listens, the empire around him breathes in and out like an old sleeping cat. Mali is rich in everything but time. Decisions happen slowly, by consensus or exhaustion. Leaders rise through charisma, clever marriages, or being the last person standing. Musa watches this unfold like a play, absorbing the subtle ways power moves. How one word from a griot can make or break a noble's reputation, how trade routes shift like rivers when the winds change. He's not flashy. Not the kind of boy who breaks horses or challenges elders. But he has a gaze like a hawk and the patience of a termite colony. You start to notice him watching other people, always watching.
Traders, priests, warriors, cooks.
He's building a map of the world in his head, and he's labeling it in whispers. Then, one afternoon, something peculiar happens. Word arrives from the coast. The king, Musa's cousin or uncle, depending on whose family tree you're looking at, has embarked on a voyage.
Not just a weekend boat ride.
A full-blown sea-bound expedition westward to find the other side of the ocean. Some say he's gone mad. Others claim he's been called by God. A few think he's just bored and too rich for his own good.
The voyage is massive.
Ships filled with supplies, rowers, scholars, navigators. All gone into the Atlantic, swallowed by blue. You blink, and just like that, the king is no longer here. And neither is his successor. He left the whole empire in Musa's hands. Technically, he named Musa as deputy. But when weeks turn to months and months to years, people stop saying acting king, and start saying the king. You glance over at Musa, now barely in his 20s, and he looks just as surprised as you. There's no coronation with fireworks, no dramatic thunderclap. Just a long, sleepy meeting where the elders nod, the scribes write slowly, and the griots clear their throats. One moment Musa is a curious river-watching boy. The next, he is Mansa Musa, Lord of the Gold, protector of the faith, and possibly the most accidentally powerful person on the continent. You pause to take it in. The breeze off the river stirs his robes. His brow furrows, not with arrogance, but with the dawning weight of everything he's inherited.
The camels don't care.
The markets don't pause. But Molly shifts a little.
The air feels heavier. You feel it too. This is no Bedtime story anymore.
This is the part where you realize you're holding the steering wheel, and the cart is full of gold, goats, scholars, and expectations.
Sleep tight.
You wake to the smell of morning millet and the muffled thud of sandals on sand. Mansa Musa has been king for only a few weeks now, and already the palace has taken on the quiet, focused hum of a place where big things are planned over small bowls of stew. You trail him into the inner courtyard, past painted mud walls and low doors that force even royals to bow before entering. There's no gold throne here, no peacocks fanning their feathers for show. Just a shaded bench, some dried figs, and a few wise men who've spent more time under the stars than indoors.
And Musa listens, really listens.
Not like someone pretending to care, but like someone building a bridge with every word. He's new to this whole king thing, but he understands the assignment: hold the empire together, don't break the tax system, and try not to start a civil war before lunch. Mali at this time isn't just a big stretch of land, it's a web. Rivers, caravan trails, languages, rival cities, and rival gods.
And gold.
So much gold it becomes a problem. It leaks from the empire like glitter, and every trader from Cairo to Constantinople hears rumors of it. Musa knows it too, and knows that gold without order is just a target on your back.
So he starts small.
Not with grand reforms, but with logistics. Roads get patched. Storage granaries are rebuilt. Scouts are sent to map the outer reaches of the empire, places where people swear they belong to Mali, but nobody's quite sure. You spot a few scribes arguing over how to spell the name of a town that may or may not exist.
Tatzekind of empire this is. Still, Musa dreams big.
You see it in the way he fingers the calligraphy scrolls sent from the Maghreb, or the quiet awe in his voice when he hears stories of Baghdad's libraries. He wants Mali to be more than rich, he wants it to be wise.
This brings us to the mosques.
In Timbuktu and Gao, he begins laying plans to turn dusty market cities into centers of learning. He calls in architects from across North Africa, commissions new buildings, and establishes places where the Quran is studied alongside astronomy, law, and even poetry. One visitor later says you can buy a book in Timbuktu for the price of a goat. Another says it's the only city where the booksellers are louder than the spice vendors. Historians still argue whether this was a calculated power move or a genuine love for scholarship.
Probably both.
Musa knows that an educated class isn't just useful, it's a kind of invisible army. One that carries your legacy longer than swords or taxes.
And then there's the salt. Ot, isn't it?
In a kingdom swimming in gold, salt becomes the real obsession. Caravans bring it in long blocks from the Sahara, stacked like bricks, wrapped in woven fiber. It's not just seasoning, it's preservation, currency, medicine. In the heat of Mali, salt means survival. You imagine Musa at a trade meeting, fingering a block of the stuff like a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. Deals are struck.
Tribes are placated.
He's learning that empires aren't ruled by force, but by favor, patience, and the occasional extravagant gift. One gift, though, is still on the horizon. You see, Musa has been thinking about something bigger. Something that will stitch his name into the tapestry of global memory. He's planning a journey. Not just any journey.
Stern-Journey. A pilgrimage to Mecca.
It's a religious duty for Muslims, but also a rare opportunity for a West African king to show his face, and his empire's riches, on the global stage. And Musa doesn't plan to travel light. No backpack and sandals here. He begins assembling the most absurdly luxurious road trip in history. Tens of thousands of people. Hundreds of camels. Slaves, scribes, soldiers, musicians, and cooks. It's less like a caravan and more like a moving city. You overhear someone say, he plans to take enough gold to make Cairo choke.
You chuckle.
Surely that's an exaggeration.
It's not.
But for now, the journey is still being stitched together. You can feel the excitement brewing like summer storm clouds. And Musa, measured, polite, curious Musa, stands at the heart of it all, already imagining the road that winds from Mali to Mecca, lined with blessings, dangers, and markets full of strangers who will never forget the king who wandered in with a gold-draped camel and a heart full of dreams. You rise earlier now. There's too much to see, and even the slow rhythm of palace life has quickened. The preparations for Musa's grand pilgrimage to Mecca are no longer whispers in council meetings, they're everywhere. Camels are being brushed with palm fronds.
Silks arrive by the bell.
And gold is being counted in rooms so well guarded even the guards whisper. You follow a group of scribes who are listing inventory. Not scrolls or food, but gifts, ornamental swords, brocaded tunics, goblets with ivory stems. You spot a small mountain of gold dust being measured out by weight, poured carefully into leather pouches, each stamped with a sunburst, the royal seal. Mansa Musa, always soft-spoken, is more animated these days. He walks the corridors with lists folded inside his robes, consulting with merchants and mathematicians alike. How many camels can carry water before they collapse? What's the price of flour between Walata and Tuwat? Which oasis wells have the least bitter water? These are not the concerns of a typical king. But Musa isn't typical. You begin to notice how this trip is changing him. No longer just a ruler managing an empire, he's becoming a symbol.
A moving story. A legend in the making.
Historians still argue whether Musa planned the full spectacle from the beginning or whether it snowballed as he prepared. But one thing is clear, he wants the world to know Mali. And so the caravan begins to gather. Tales say there were 60,000 people in his retinue.
You won't count them. You'd lose your place before breakfast.
But you see the soldiers in formation, the musicians tuning stringed instruments you can't name, and the griots, oral historians, rehearsing the names of every ancestor and battle they might recite for curious audiences along the way.
And 10, the camels.
Over 100 of them carrying gold. Not just bags of coins, gold dust in embroidered satchels, golden walking sticks, golden saddle ornaments. Even the camel reins have golden clasps. One of the handlers jokes, "These beasts are richer than half the villages we'll pass." You hear of slaves too, 12,000 of them. Some carrying goods, others part of the display. It's a sobering detail, a reminder that even in a grand pilgrimage, shadows travel with the procession. Musa, by all accounts, treated them well. But the world of 1324 is not our own. Comfort exists side by side with coercion, and Musa's gold-lined sandals walk across both. The departure is slow. This is not a sprint but a procession. Cities and towns pour into the roads to watch. Musicians play as the lead camels sway toward the horizon. You see parents hoist children onto their shoulders for a better look. One small boy whispers, "He's going to see the house of God." His mother hushes him, but smiles. And so you set off with the royal caravan, following the Niger River's curve, cutting through the Sahel. It's not all parades and poetry. There are sandstorms that steal your breath, and flies that seem to multiply in direct proportion to your fatigue. But still, the grandeur is unmistakable. At each stop, Musa distributes gifts.
Notmodest trinkets, lavish donations. A mosque here. A school tere.
A bundle of gold coins pressed into the hands of a village elder. This is diplomacy in its finest robes. And then, you arrive in Wallata, the first major staging post of the trans-Saharan trade.
The city is stunned.
They've seen merchants before, but never a king who tips with golden rings and prays beside shepherds. Musa pays for lodging not just for himself, but for his entire entourage. No wonder the town's bakeries run out of flour by noon.
From Wallata, the caravan enters the real test. The Sahara. You've heard stories.
Camels swallowed whole by sand. Wells dried to bone. Temperatures that melt wax and men alike. But this isn't just myth. This is the part of the journey where you begin to appreciate how quietly determined Musa is. He doesn't flinch at hardship. He rises before dawn, prays in silence, and presses forward. You pass salt mines, ghostly operations that look like abandoned ruins, but still hum with trade. Workers there blink in disbelief as the royal caravan glides past. Some drop their chisels just to gape. The oases become your lifelines. In Tuwat, Musa gifts the local leader a robe sewn with lapis threads. In Tagaza, he allegedly buys all the salt blocks just to feed his camels and brag. Okay, maybe not just to brag. But the gesture ripples down trade routes faster than a dust storm. And then, at long last, you see the gates of Cairo. By now, you've heard the rumors ahead of you. People in Egypt talk of the king with golden sandals, who brings his own shade in the form of silk canopies and donates more gold than a local mint can handle. You wonder, will he impress the Mamluk Sultan? But that's a story for the next nightfall.
For now, you lie under unfamiliar stars, the city of Cairo flickering in the distance.
And you think, not of gold, but of the quiet way Musa holds his empire in his heart, even as he marches thousands of miles away from it. And in return, receives 3 water guides who know the desert wells by heart. You're grateful. Without them, you suspect half the camels would wander off and take your slippers with them.
Nichts in the Sahara feel like a different planet.
The stars, sharp and endless, blanket the sky so closely you think you might reach out and touch them. You lay near the cooking fires, listening to griots murmuring tales of ancient kings whose names have faded from even the wind. One story ends with, "And he vanished beneath a dune, only his gold bowl left behind."
You took your own bowl a little closer that night. Weeks pass. Your lips crack from the heat. You learn to love bitter tea.
You wrap your turban tighter each morning.
And 10, the horizon changes. Tere, almost like a mirage, is Cairo.
You arrive dusty, sunburnt, and a little amazed you didn't collapse near that last scorpion-infested rest stop.
But Musa?
He's immaculate. His robes are white, his smile calm. He rides through the gates with gold on his saddle, silk fluttering behind him, and the patience of a man who's rehearsed this arrival in his dreams. Cairo in 1324 is no ordinary city. It's the hub of Mamluk power, bustling with scholars, poets, jewelers, and markets where spices dance through the air.
Minarets lean towards the sky, calling the faithful to prayer. The nile glistens beside the city like a lazy serpent, thick with feluccas.
And when Mansa Musa arrives, Cairo notices. The Sultan of Egypt, Al-Nasir Muhammad, doesn't meet him right away.
Protocol, apparently. Or maybe suspicion.
Historians still argue whether Al-Nasir hesitated because of Musa's overwhelming retinue, or because he simply couldn't believe a black king from the south commanded such power and wealth. So, for days, you and the caravan settle in. You find rooms near the Mosque of Ibn Tuluan. You explore marketplaces so chaotic they make Timbuktu seem like a quiet whisper. And then the gold begins to flow. Musa gives freely.
To merchants, to scholars, to the poor.
The streets ring with coins and rumors. He gave a bag to a beggar just for smiling. Someone exclaims. Musa also funds the renovation of mosques, purchases manuscripts, and even pays local scribes to copy holy texts for his libraries back home. He meets the Sultan at last, after much persuasion, and the account of their meeting is oddly formal. Alamari, a scholar who later writes about the encounter, reports that Musa had to be coached to perform the courtly bow. "I bow to no man but God," he supposedly said, before relenting with grace. Whether that's entirely true or just the embellishment of a giddy historian, you're not sure.
But it's a good story either way. The real impact, however, is economic.
You hear Cairo's traders mutter about inflation. Gold has become so common it's lost value.
Prices rise.
Bread costs more than a camel's bridle. A historian centuries later would claim Musa's visit caused the only inflationary crisis from a single individual's spending in recorded history. Now that's a flex. But in Musa's mind, it's generosity.
It's image.
It's God's work, elevated with gold leaf and sincerity. While in Cairo, you notice another change in Musa. He grows quieter, more contemplative.
The call to prayer echoes louder here.
The scholars speak Arabic so fast it sounds like wind-blown paper. Musa spends long hours with jurists and theologians. You see him debating doctrine under oil lamps, trying to memorize obscure verses, perhaps sensing that to be both king and pilgrim is to live in two worlds at once. He also begins arranging his return. But not directly. No, he wants to pass through Mecca, as every devout Muslim must. And the caravan will continue.
You purchase fresh sandals.
Your old ones look like they fought a war. You pack dates and fill your waterskin. You're going to Mecca, alongside the richest man in the known world, whose heart beats with faith, but whose footsteps shake economies. And still, somehow, he walks softly. You cross the Red Sea by boat, salt stinging your nose and hair whipping like prayer flags in the wind. It's a short voyage, but it marks something immense, your first steps into the Arabian Peninsula. The very ground feels different. Lighter, perhaps. As though centuries of pilgrimage have smoothed the sand and carved reverence into every stone. Mecca lies ahead.
You've heard of it, of course.
Even in the court of Mali, stories of the holy city drifted like perfume through scholars' rooms and market whispers. Now you're actually approaching it, with the man who's become legend in real time. Mansa Musa walks calmly, as if he's simply heading to Friday prayers, not fulfilling one of the 5 pillars of Islam while trailed by the most expensive prayer beads ever packed on a camel.
The road is quicker here.
Less fanfare, more prayer. Even the camels seem to understand this part of the journey is not for show.
You hear Musa recite verses softly.
His eyes rest longer on the horizon. When you pass other pilgrims, some stare, wide-eyed, slack-jawed, at the size of your group.
But no one speaks against it. This is Mecca.
Status dissolves into dust and worship.
Mostly.
When you finally arrive, the Kaaba rises like a black meteor fallen from heaven.
You feel a strange stillness in your chest.
Pilgrims circle the sacred cube in silent unity, a spiral of bodies and longing. Musa enters humbly, barefoot, robes plain, gold tucked away. Here, he is one among many.
No throne, no crown.
Just a man facing God.
And yet, people notice.
Whispers trail behind him, that's the king from Africa. The one who gave a bag of gold to a spice vendor in Cairo. Did you see his guards? Their swords are curved like gazelle horns. You see Musa spend hours in prayer. He sits in the shade with scholars from Persia and Yemen, sharing thoughts on law, poetry, the struggle between the self and the soul. He asks questions.
Deep ones.
The kind that make jurists stroke their beards and smile with surprise. Historians still debate whether he made legal pledges here to incorporate more Islamic jurisprudence into Mali's courts, or if he was simply soaking in what centuries of Arabic scholarship could offer. One afternoon, you follow him into the bookstalls. Yes, even here, there are books. Handwritten scrolls and bound Qurans, history texts, mathematical treatises, poetry collections so delicate they're wrapped in silk. Musa purchases dozens.
You help carry them.
He treats each manuscript like a relic. To him, knowledge is worth more than gold, though thankfully, he has both. There's also talk of architecture. Musa spends time studying the layout of Mecca's mosques, the elegance of arches, the simplicity of courtyards that invite silence. He sketches ideas on scraps of papyrus, planning how he might one day build mosques in Mali that echo the grace of these holy structures. The memory of sand-colored brick and incense-thick prayer halls will return with you across the desert, like perfume clinging to your cloak. The caravan rests in Mecca longer than expected.
Weeks, Maibe.
The dates blur together in the heat. There are meals shared with imams, and starry nights filled with quiet discussions under stretched canvas. You begin to think Musa may never want to leave.
There's peace here.
A kind of anonymity that must feel rare for a man whose every sneeze back home might be recorded by a griot. But eventually, plans form.
The return must happen. Molly calls.
The pilgrimage's second half begins with fresh direction. Musa now carries with him a deeper Islamic identity, one shaped not just by faith but by experience. He's walked the steps of the Prophet.
He's bowed at the Kaaba.
And now he's returning home not just as emperor, but as someone who's seen the center of the Muslim world and plans to bring a little of it back with him.
You prepare the camels again. Load the scrolls. Dust of your robe.
There are rumors that the return leg will be less gold-laden. After all, Musa gave so much away that some whisper he might need to borrow supplies for the journey back. Whether that's true or just a dramatic traveler's tale, no one can say for sure. But it's clear the journey has changed him, and you. As the desert winds rise once more, you glance back at the holy city, knowing your footprints there will vanish, but something quieter, deeper will stay. You set off from Mecca as the early sun spills gold across the dunes. Ironic, really, considering the actual gold is now in short supply.
The return journey feels different.
Not only in tone, but in terrain, temperature, and tension. You notice fewer camels wear jeweled saddles. Fewer servants carry ornamental parasols. The once grand caravan has trimmed its excess, like a tree shedding branches before winter. Mansa Musa walks with the same calm demeanor, but there's a gravity to his gaze. He's not just a king returning from pilgrimage. He's a man who's glimpsed the divine center of his faith and now bears the quiet pressure of bringing that insight home. Every step is forward, but also inward. You notice a few traders trailing the caravan, trying to get close. They're not thieves, just desperate merchants who've heard the wild tales, that the king of Mali handed out gold like dates at a feast, that he caused economic ripples so deep the dinars still haven't settled. And indeed, historians still argue whether Musa single-handedly caused an inflation crisis in Cairo that took a decade to stabilize. Some say he flooded markets with so much gold that its value plummeted. Others claim that's exaggerated, a bedtime story told by jealous scribes with fragile budgets. What's not debated is this: the caravan that left Mecca isn't the same as the one that left Timbuktu over a year ago.
The return is harsher.
Dust clings thicker, the camels groan more audibly, and water becomes a whispered prayer. You pass through Medina, then along the Red Sea coast again, but this time the hospitality is tempered by fatigue.
No more parades. No free gold shores.
Some cities you pass through reluctantly offer lodging, eyes calculating your diminishing worth.
And then, tragedy.
Somewhere near Sinai, word spreads through camp like smoke: several key attendants have fallen ill. Possibly from bad dates, possibly from the water. The desert is no place for medical nuance. They die quietly. There's no fanfare, just simple prayers and sand-covered shrouds. You help lower a body into the earth with trembling fingers. The first grave of the return trip, but not the last. At night, Musa prays longer. He seems older now, though it's only been months. Sometimes he talks about home, the Niger River's muddy banks, the sound of griots singing in the twilight, the cool stone of the Jingareber mosque he hopes to build, or rebuild, with what he's learned. His words drift in the campfire smoke, more dreams than declarations.
And still you move.
One evening, as the caravan trudges through a blistering salt plain, you spot a small band of pilgrims heading east. One stops to speak, a scholar from Al-Andalus, soft-spoken and bright-eyed. He recognizes Musa and bows respectfully, then the two fall into long discussion over astronomy and philosophy. Musa invites him to Mali. The scholar hesitates, then agrees. Just like that, your caravan gains a new companion, one who will later help establish Mali's universities. You don't know it yet, but this Andalusian traveler will play a key role in turning Timbuktu into a scholarly beacon for centuries to come. Such meetings are the silver linings of the return. Despite the losses, despite the debt Musa quietly assumes to finish the journey. Yes, he borrows gold and goods from cities that once benefited from his largesse, there's a strange richness to the road back.
Ideas, people, books, dreams.
What's been spent in coin is slowly being replaced by knowledge and vision. Crossing into Egypt again, you feel the shift. Cairo this time receives you without fanfare. No more public gold gifts. In fact, Musa meets privately with merchants and officials to quietly buy back some of the gold he gave away, at a loss of course. It's said he felt responsible for the economic chaos he left behind, and this was his attempt to restore balance. Whether that's true or simply legend woven in hindsight, it speaks to his character, generous, but not reckless.
Ambitious, but not blind.
Back through the Sahara, the desert greets you with its usual indifference. But now, you've learned to respect it. The same grains of sand that once irritated your every fold now feel like old company, unforgiving but familiar.
You wrap your turban tighter, dream of rivers. Some nights, Musa speaks of plans. Grand Onis. A university.
A mosque that captures Mecca's elegance but with West African soul. A legal system that blends Islamic principle with Mali's traditions. He's seen the world, and now he wants to shape his own corner of it. At last, after countless miles, you and the rest of the caravan crest the dunes that signal the end of the journey. The distant outline of the city of Mali, a proud, thriving urban center, appears on the horizon, framed by the golden haze of the setting sun.
The end is near.
There's no parade this time, no fanfare, just the quiet hum of anticipation among the exhausted travelers. In the distance, you can see the bustling marketplace of Timbuktu, where people continue their lives as if nothing extraordinary has happened. Yet, for you, the journey back has irrevocably changed everything. Mansa Musa steps off his camel with the steady gait of a king who knows his purpose is far from finished. His mind is already on the future. He's back in his kingdom, but the imprint of the journey remains. His wealth, once the talk of empires, is now seen less as a material fortune and more as a tool for a greater vision. The gold was a symbol, not of excess, but of potential. The journey, rather than a mere pilgrimage, has paved the way for the dawn of an era of education, architecture, and knowledge, an era that will echo for centuries. Timbuktu is buzzing with excitement when Musa arrives. It's a city of trade, culture, and intellect, long known for its vibrant markets and diverse peoples. Yet, the city holds the promise of even more. Musa has spent the past months dreaming of expanding it into a hub of knowledge. He's witnessed the grandeur of Cairo's libraries, the intellectual feats of Cordoba, and the academies of Egypt. Now, he is determined to build a similar center in the heart of West Africa, a beacon of learning for generations to come. Timbuktu, situated along the Niger River, is a natural crossroads for commerce, but Musa envisions something much larger. He doesn't just want a marketplace, he wants a university. And not just any university, but one that will rival the greatest centers of learning in the world. As you travel through the city with him, you see the first steps of his grand plans unfolding. He speaks to scholars from across the Islamic world, inviting them to settle in Mali. The contracts are drawn up. The first manuscripts are ordered. The grand building that will become the University of Sankore begins to take shape, brick by brick. In just a few short years, Timbuktu will become one of the world's foremost intellectual capitals, a place where knowledge is as valuable as gold. But the road is not without challenges. Mansa Musa's return is met with a mixture of awe and wariness. Though his subjects are grateful for the wealth he has brought, some question the wisdom of his lavishness. In a kingdom where many still live in modest huts, the extravagant gifts and architectural dreams seem almost out of reach. Historians still debate whether this lavish expenditure was a stroke of genius or a short-sighted miscalculation. Some suggest Musa's grand vision for Mali may have strained its resources, even if the long-term payoff would prove monumental. You see the workers toiling under the hot sun, building libraries, schools, and mosques. They labor with dedication, inspired by their king's belief that knowledge is the true treasure of Mali. Musa himself is rarely seen in the midst of the construction. Instead, he's in the halls, speaking to scholars and artists, shaping the intellectual future of his people. His work feels more like a gentle whisper, leading his people into the future, not with the bluster of wealth, but with the quiet assurance of intellect and culture. It's in these quiet moments that you feel the depth of Musa's transformation. Gone is the brash, gold-hurling king of legend. In his place is a leader who understands the weight of knowledge, the power of education, and the lasting legacy of culture. His true wealth, you now realize, is not in gold or land, but in the minds of those he inspires. Yet, as his vision grows, so does the pressure. His kingdom has witnessed a brief, glorious period of prosperity, but now it's time to face the consequences of his decisions. The cost of his journey, his gold, and his dreams must be paid. And, for better or worse, it will be the people of Mali who bear that weight. Musa has brought Mali to the world's attention, but it remains to be seen whether the legacy he is building will be enough to sustain his kingdom through the inevitable challenges ahead. Mansa Musa's return from Mecca marks the beginning of an intricate balancing act. On one hand, his kingdom is flourishing. Markets are brimming with goods from across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Timbuktu is evolving into an intellectual haven, with scholars from far-flung lands converging to contribute their knowledge. It's the dawn of a golden age for Mali, and Musa's name is now etched into history as a king who turned his wealth into lasting cultural capital. But with great success comes inevitable challenges. While the wealth and intellectual blossoming of the empire are undeniable, there is a growing sense of unease among some of Musa's subjects. The lavishness of his pilgrimage and the construction of his grand university have placed a strain on Mali's resources. Historians still debate whether the king's expenditures were sustainable. Some argue that the short-term financial outpouring required to support such ambitious projects might have overextended Mali's economy, despite the long-term cultural benefits. Musa himself is aware of these tensions. In fact, you can almost feel the weight of the crown growing heavier with each passing day. As much as he believes in the power of knowledge and culture to uplift his people, he can't ignore the murmurs of dissatisfaction that seem to echo through the palace halls. The riches he brought back from Mecca were never intended to make him a mere figure of excess, but he begins to question whether some of his grand gestures may have inadvertently destabilized the kingdom he worked so hard to build. Mali's newfound prominence on the world stage means it is now the subject of international attention. Neighboring empires, including the powerful kingdom of Songhai and the Berber Almoravid dynasty, are watching closely. They see the rise of Mali as an opportunity, whether to collaborate or compete, depending on their own interests. Mansa Musa has become the figurehead of a new African empire, but maintaining the position will require delicate diplomacy. His wealth and ambition, once seen as the keys to greatness, are now regarded with a mix of admiration and wariness. Foreign merchants and scholars arrive in Mali in droves, eager to see firsthand the splendor of a land that has seemingly come out of nowhere. You can almost hear their whispered conversations, as they marvel at the king's success while secretly wondering how long such prosperity can last. Musa, ever the diplomat, continues to play the long game. He entertains emissaries from across the world, eager to form alliances and secure Mali's place among the great powers of the medieval world. He welcomes ambassadors from Egypt, Morocco, and even Europe with open arms. His court is a mix of cultures, languages, and ideas, making it a rich tapestry of intellectual exchange. You feel the excitement in the air as scholars from Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba engage in debates and discussions, sharing new ideas and perspectives that ripple through the kingdom like waves. Yet, amidst all the prosperity, there are signs that not all is as it seems. As the years pass, the once wealthy city of Mali begins to show signs of strain. The labor needed to sustain the grand architectural projects and the influx of foreign influences is beginning to take a toll on the local populace. The very wealth that once made the city a beacon of civilization now feels like a double-edged sword. Historians still argue whether the concentration of resources in such lavish ventures led to neglect of Mali's agricultural base, which was the backbone of the kingdom. Musa's dream of building an empire of knowledge and culture remains alive, but the realities of empire building are beginning to weigh heavily on him. There's a subtle shift in his demeanor, a quiet realization that the road ahead will be full of unforeseen hurdles. The seeds of Mali's greatness are planted, but whether they will grow into a lasting legacy remains to be seen. You continue to walk with Musa as he inspects the construction of the University of Sankore. The building, which had once been a mere dream in his mind, is now becoming a reality. Scholars are hard at work, and the university promises to become a place where generations of minds will be nurtured. You can hear the soft sounds of writing, the scribbling of quills on parchment, as the future of Mali begins to take shape in the minds of its students. But as you walk alongside him, you can't help but wonder, will this grand vision withstand the tests of time? The legacy of Mansa Musa may be firmly rooted in gold, but his greatest achievement might not be measured in wealth at all. It's in the quiet pursuit of knowledge, the patience it takes to build something that will outlast even the most glittering of treasures. The question that lingers is whether the pursuit will be enough to secure Mali's place in the annals of history. As the years pass and the grandeur of Mansa Musa's empire begins to settle into the fabric of history, the weight of his reign begins to take on a more subtle tone. While the construction of magnificent structures, like the Great Mosque of Djinguereber, continues to stand as a testament to his ambition, there's a quiet realization that perhaps the prosperity he brought to Mali can no longer be counted solely in gold. As the empire enters its later stages, it's clear that Mansa Musa's legacy is shaped less by his riches and more by his ability to balance the spiritual and intellectual with the practical. Though the kingdom remains a center of cultural exchange and scholarly pursuit, the challenges of empire building are beginning to reveal themselves in unexpected ways. The complexity of overseeing such a vast, diverse realm weighs on Musa, and the internal dynamics of his court become more intricate with each passing year. Historians still argue whether Musa's later years were marked by a wise consolidation of power or an empire beginning to fray at the edges. Musa, now a man who has witnessed both the zenith and the quiet descent of his vast empire, turns inward to reflect on the weight of his rule. His dreams of a golden Mali are no longer just about gold. He has come to realize that the strength of an empire lies in the bonds it weaves with its people, its institutions, and its place in the world. But despite this wisdom, there are cracks in the foundations that even he cannot ignore. The shift from extravagance to sustainability becomes evident as Musa starts to focus on the inner workings of his empire. The educational systems, the trade routes, and the spiritual institutions of Mali continue to thrive, but there is an underlying concern about maintaining this momentum. You sense that Mansa Musa, ever the strategist, is beginning to think about the future, not just in terms of his own reign, but in terms of the longevity of his dynasty and the legacy he leaves behind. Even as Musa contemplates these matters, Mali's position as a trade hub begins to face increasing competition. Neighboring kingdoms, like Songhai and the Berbers, begin to push back against the influence Mali once held so effortlessly. The caravan routes that had once flowed like rivers of gold now face increasing challenges, with new trade routes opening up that bypass Mali's central position. The region is undergoing a shift, and the old ways are beginning to show signs of strain. But even as these changes loom on the horizon, there is a renewed sense of purpose within Musa. The challenges that have emerged don't dishearten him, they energize him. He still believes that knowledge is the greatest gift an empire can offer, and he invests more heavily in the educational and spiritual institutions of Mali. Timbuktu, once a small town on the edge of the desert, continues to grow into an intellectual powerhouse. You can almost feel the quiet hum of scholarly debate, the rustling of ancient texts, and the rush of ideas being passed between generations. As the winds of change begin to blow through the empire, Musa remains a figure who seems to exist between the world of riches and the world of knowledge. He's not just a king with gold in his hands. He's a man who has built something far more enduring. In this quieter phase of his reign, the challenges of leadership seem less about personal glory and more about sustaining the empire's ideals for the long haul. Historians still debate whether Mansa Musa's vision for Mali was too ambitious, but you can't help but feel that in his heart, Musa's desire was never about achieving greatness for himself. It was about securing Mali's place in the world as a beacon of learning and prosperity. And as he looks out over the vast expanse of the Sahel, you can sense the quiet satisfaction in his gaze. Though the tides of history may shift, the dream he built is now a permanent part of the landscape. The kingdom of Mali will not last forever. No empire does, but Musa's legacy, shaped by his vast wealth and his commitment to the pursuit of knowledge, will echo across centuries. The universities, the scholars, the trade routes, and the people of Mali will carry his name long after his reign has ended. And as you walk beside him, you realize that the true greatness of Mansa Musa was not just in what he accomplished during his lifetime, but in the foundation he laid for generations to come. The later years of Mansa Musa's reign are not marked by the same overwhelming wealth that had characterized his earlier rule. Yet, in this quieter period, his empire, despite its challenges, flourishes in a more nuanced way. Musa no longer finds himself parading through the streets of Cairo, showing off his riches to a world unprepared for such extravagance. Instead, he shifts his focus inward, with an eye on Mali's sustainability for future generations. It's during this time that Musa's philosophical nature begins to shine through. He knows that the foundations of an empire are built not just on gold but on stability, peace, and knowledge. Timbuktu, which he had already helped transform into a vibrant center of scholarship, continues to thrive, attracting scholars and intellectuals from far and wide. You can almost hear the rustling of papyrus and the scratching of quills as students debate the meanings of ancient texts, their thoughts weaving together a tapestry of learning. Historians still argue whether this intellectual flourish could have been sustained without the stability Musa provided, or if his empire's military and economic prowess had allowed this cultural boom to take root. Mansa Musa's commitment to education becomes one of his most enduring legacies. At this point in his life, his wealth no longer serves as the primary means of demonstrating power. Instead, his influence grows from his ability to nurture a thriving intellectual and spiritual community. Mali's libraries, which hold thousands of manuscripts, become repositories of knowledge, where scholars can study everything from astronomy to medicine, philosophy to history. Even centuries after his reign, the ruins of these libraries are a quiet testament to the cultural revolution he set in motion. Yet, despite his efforts to balance intellectual growth with political stability, the empire begins to feel the weight of its size and diversity. As Mali's borders stretch further, governing such a vast realm proves increasingly difficult.
The Empires internal administration faces growing challenges, and the also unified central authority begins to fray.
Musa, aware of the looming difficulties, begins to focus on strengthening Mali's inner workings. He commissions new systems of governance, creating a more centralized and efficient bureaucracy, which allows for more local autonomy. Historians still debate whether these measures were enough to counteract the weakening of central power or whether they were merely a temporary solution to a growing problem. Despite these concerns, Mansa Musa's commitment to Mali's prosperity remains unwavering. He continues to support the arts, building mosques, schools, and other public works. His personal wealth, once a symbol of Mali's grandeur, is now redirected into the empire's infrastructure. Under Musa's leadership, Mali remains one of the most powerful empires in West Africa, but the signs of decline are starting to show. The empire's military might, once unmatched, begins to face increasing pressure from rival kingdoms and internal rebellions. The military and political tensions are further compounded by the changing global dynamics. The rise of new trade routes and the shifting allegiances of neighboring empires challenge Mali's position as a regional power. Musa, however, never loses sight of the larger picture. He knows that Mali's true strength lies in its people, its culture, and its place in the world of learning. While the empire faces the pressures of external and internal forces, it continues to hold an intellectual and spiritual allure that draws people from across the world. Even as the empire begins to lose some of its former grandeur, Musa's personal influence remains strong. He continues to serve as a beacon of wisdom and a symbol of Mali's greatness. The quiet strength of his leadership during these later years speaks volumes about his vision and his ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Though the world around him shifts, Mansa Musa remains an enduring figure, a ruler whose legacy is marked not just by his wealth, but by his contributions to knowledge, culture, and the spirit of Mali. In this phase of his reign, Musa seems to have shifted from the exuberant conqueror to the thoughtful ruler. He no longer seeks to expand his empire with the same fervor. Instead, he concentrates on maintaining and nurturing what he has built. And while the challenges mount, there is a sense of peace in the way Musa approaches them. His greatest triumphs, it seems, were not in the conquests or the gold, but in the quiet moments of reflection that guided him toward preserving the soul of his empire. As the years pass, Mansa Musa's health begins to decline. The once vibrant king, who had traveled the deserts and the oceans with ease, now finds himself slower, his body more fragile. The enormity of his earlier accomplishments may have weighed on him in ways no one could fully understand. The gold that once glittered so brightly in his treasury no longer seems to matter as much. The empire he built, the scholars he supported, and the legacy he left behind, all of that is what Musa now treasures. Historians still wonder what it was that truly wore down Mansa Musa. Was it the relentless pursuit of greatness, the pressure of maintaining an empire so vast, or simply the aging process that caught up with him in the end? Regardless of the cause, his later years are quieter than his earlier ones. The ruler who once stood on the banks of the Nile, handing out gold to a captivated crowd, now finds peace in his thoughts and reflections on the journey he's taken. In the final chapter of his life, Musa surrounds himself with the people and projects he holds most dear. He revisits the cities he helped build, reflecting on the years of leadership and the thriving culture he nurtured. His role as a patron of the arts remains a defining feature of his reign. The scholars he mentored continue to develop their ideas in his absence, teaching the next generation of Malians about history, philosophy, and science. Even in the waning days of his health, Musa's influence is undeniable. His reputation remains intact. Mansa Musa, the richest king who ever lived, was also a king who valued knowledge and culture above all. Musa's death is not met with grand ceremonies or vast celebrations. By this point, his empire has shifted into a new phase of existence. His heirs inherit an empire that is, at once, prosperous and strained. There are whispers in the court of Mali about how to proceed without the legendary king. Historians still debate how much of the empire's eventual fragmentation can be traced back to Musa's death. It is often said that no one could truly replace him, and his absence leaves a significant power vacuum. His legacy, though profound, cannot entirely shield Mali from the challenges that await it. But even in death, Mansa Musa's influence persists. His contributions to the world of learning and culture continue to resonate for generations. The universities he helped establish in Timbuktu and other parts of his empire remain beacons of knowledge for centuries to come. The manuscripts he funded, containing everything from scientific discoveries to philosophical musings, are passed down through the generations. Although the empire of Mali itself eventually loses some of its former grandeur, the memory of Mansa Musa lives on in the hearts and minds of those who carry on his work. It is said that Musa, even in his final years, continued to dream of a better, more prosperous Mali. His mind, though clouded by age, never ceased to envision new ways to elevate his people. He is remembered not just as a man of immense wealth, but as a man of vision, a ruler who understood that true greatness lay not in the gold he could give away, but in the lasting impact he could have on his people's minds and hearts. As we imagine the closing of this remarkable king's life, we can picture him not as the conqueror who once stunned the world with his riches, but as the thoughtful, peaceful ruler who made sure that his legacy would endure through knowledge and culture. In his death, Mansa Musa left a world that was richer for his existence, not in gold, but in ideas, education, and the hope that he had inspired in those who came after him. Perhaps, in the stillness of his final days, Musa found the peace he had longed for. He had lived a life that no one could ever truly replicate. His story, from humble beginnings to unimaginable wealth, is one of ambition, generosity, and lasting change. And though his empire would eventually fade into history, his legacy would live on, gently cradled by the scholars and thinkers he helped to flourish. Mansa Musa's death marks the end of an era, but his legacy continues to ripple through the corridors of time. His empire of Mali, once a dominant force in West Africa, begins to shift in the years following his passing. The empire's wealth and influence remain, but the internal strife and external pressures take their toll. The wealth Musa amassed, both in gold and culture, cannot protect the empire from the inevitable passage of time. Yet, it is in these years after his death that the full extent of Musa's legacy begins to shine in ways he might not have anticipated. Historians still debate the true extent of Musa's empire. Was it the largest in the world at its peak, as some have claimed, or was it simply the most influential? What is certain is that it held a commanding presence across much of West Africa. The empire's wealth, particularly its gold resources, made it one of the most powerful states of its time. Even though the empire eventually began to fragment, the impact of Mansa Musa's reign is undeniable. In the decades following his death, many of Musa's achievements continue to shape the world around him. The cities he nurtured, Timbuktu, Gao and Jen, remain vital centers of trade, culture, and learning. Despite the eventual decline of the empire, these cities continue to serve as symbols of Mali's golden age. Musa's efforts to build these cities into hubs of scholarship are particularly remembered. The universities he established remain central to the intellectual history of Africa for centuries to come. In particular, Timbuktu, under Musa's patronage, becomes the focal point for a rich intellectual tradition. Even after the fall of the empire, the manuscripts, libraries, and archives he helped preserve become invaluable to the world's understanding of Africa's intellectual history. These texts, filled with knowledge on subjects ranging from astronomy to medicine, would later be rediscovered by scholars centuries after Musa's death. His commitment to learning, though it may have seemed secondary to his wealth during his lifetime, becomes the most enduring part of his legacy. The story of Mansa Musa is one of contradictions: wealth and wisdom, power and peace, conquest and culture. As the empire's political power wanes, the significance of Musa's reign only grows. His life stands as a reminder that even the most powerful empires can be undone by time and circumstance. But it also serves as a testament to the fact that true wealth lies not in the gold one accumulates, but in the legacy of knowledge, culture, and innovation that one leaves behind. By the 15th century, Mali's decline is in full swing. Successive rulers fail to maintain the unity Musa had once achieved. Invasions from the Songhai Empire and the disruption of the trans-Saharan trade routes add to the destabilization. Yet, even as the political entity of Mali fractures, the echoes of Mansa Musa's reign continue to resonate. His story is carried forward in oral traditions, through the writings of the scholars he supported, and through the continued reverence for the cities he helped build. It is in these quieter legacies, those of knowledge and culture, that Musa's true greatness is preserved. Mansa Musa's empire may have faded, but his story remains a beacon of what is possible when a ruler combines ambition with generosity. The wealth he distributed across the world was not merely in gold. It was in the intellectual and cultural capital he invested in his people. Musa's reign shows that even the most fleeting empires can leave an indelible mark on history, one that is measured not by the riches it accumulated, but by the minds it nurtured. And so, as the years go by, Mansa Musa remains a figure who transcends time. His story is not just one of unimaginable wealth. It is the story of a man who understood that the true measure of a ruler is not in their ability to amass treasure, but in their ability to inspire, uplift, and leave behind something that endures. It is a story of dreams realized and of the knowledge that the greatest legacy is one that continues to enrich lives long after the ruler's death. As we reflect on Mansa Musa's life, we are reminded that the greatest treasures are often intangible. His empire may have crumbled, but his contributions to the world, particularly in the realms of education and culture, continue to shape our understanding of the past. The legacy of Mansa Musa, the richest man to have ever lived, remains a testament to the power of vision, generosity, and the enduring value of knowledge. As we approach the final days of Mansa Musa's reign and the lasting effect he has on the world, it's essential to pause and reflect on one final aspect of his legacy: his spiritual and cultural contributions. Mansa Musa was not just a political and economic leader, he was also deeply connected to the religious and cultural transformations of his time. His devotion to Islam, which he embraced wholeheartedly, shaped not only the spiritual landscape of his empire but also its social and political fabric. His pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey that took him across vast distances, was not just a religious journey, it was a statement of power, wealth, and commitment to the faith. Historians still argue over the precise significance of his pilgrimage. Some suggest that it was a display of Musa's immense wealth, as he traveled with thousands of attendants, including soldiers, scholars, and slaves. It is said that the journey was so extravagant that it disrupted the economies of the regions he passed through. Yet, others argue that Musa's pilgrimage was a deeply personal act of piety, aimed at further solidifying his religious and spiritual authority. The truth is likely somewhere in between. What is indisputable, however, is that his journey had profound consequences for the Islamic world and for West Africa. Musa's pilgrimage brought Mali into the broader world of Islamic scholarship and culture. The connections he forged during his journey allowed scholars, architects, and artists to travel to Mali, further enriching the empire's cultural and intellectual life. The renowned scholars and architects Musa hosted in Mali contributed to the empire's cultural renaissance. This, in turn, influenced the development of the region for generations to come. Timbuktu, once a small trading town, flourished into a center of Islamic learning under Musa's reign, attracting students and scholars from all corners of the Islamic world. While his wealth and political influence often overshadow these contributions, it's crucial to recognize that Mansa Musa's devotion to Islam had a profound and lasting impact on the religious landscape of West Africa. His efforts to spread Islam throughout the region not only established it as the dominant religion but also cemented Mali's role as a key player in the greater Islamic world. It was not just his riches that garnered attention, it was his role as a patron of religious scholars and thinkers. After his death, the influence of Islam continued to spread throughout West Africa. The universities, mosques, and libraries built under his patronage were instrumental in making the region a hub for Islamic knowledge and learning. The cultural legacy of his reign persisted through the centuries, even as political power shifted and the empire slowly crumbled. These religious and intellectual centers became a beacon of light, attracting those in search of knowledge, and ensuring that Mali's influence remained long after the empire's decline. The story of Mansa Musa is also one of contrasts. While he is often remembered for his immense wealth, it is his commitment to learning and spirituality that stands out in the broader arc of his life. The opulent gold he gave away may have sparked the initial fascination with his reign, but it is the knowledge he helped preserve, the scholars he supported, and the mosques and universities he built that have had the longest-lasting effect. In a sense, the true wealth of Mansa Musa was not in his gold, it was in his vision for a culturally and intellectually rich empire that would influence generations to come. Mansa Musa's legacy in Islam is further magnified by his association with the great Malian scholars and philosophers who emerged during his reign. Some of these figures are now revered as some of the greatest minds of the pre-modern world. Figures like the famous scholar Ahmed Baba, whose contributions to Islamic thought and legal scholarship were grounded in the educational system that Mansa Musa fostered, show just how deep his impact was. These scholars, in turn, carried on Musa's intellectual legacy, ensuring that his contributions to Islamic scholarship would be felt for centuries. As we near the end of our journey through the life of Mansa Musa, it is essential to take a moment to reflect on his cultural contributions, not just as a ruler but as a patron of Islam, education, and intellectual exchange. His influence stretches far beyond the boundaries of his empire and continues to echo in the scholarly work that followed. The empire of Mali may have fallen, but the ideas that Mansa Musa nurtured and supported during his reign live on.
And now, we come to the end of our journey, the final moments of Mansa Musa's life.
You followed him from the heights of his early reign, through the riches of his empire, to the vast pilgrimage to Mecca that cemented his name in history. But as with all things, even the mighty Mansa Musa's reign eventually gave way to the passage of time. The Golden Age of Mali, one of the most prosperous and powerful empires in history, came to an end, though its echoes still reverberate in the present day. But before we wind down, let's reflect on what happened after Mansa Musa's passing. Historians still debate how exactly Mansa Musa's death affected the empire. Some argue that his immediate successors lacked the strategic acumen and resourcefulness that Musa possessed. Others contend that the very scale of the empire and the complex web of relationships that he had established were simply unsustainable in the long term. Regardless of the exact cause, what is clear is that the empire of Mali began to decline not long after Mansa Musa's death in 1337. His heirs, though competent rulers in their own right, could not match the charisma, vision, or sheer financial muscle that Musa brought to the throne. The wealth and grandeur that defined his reign were not fully sustained. The empire faced internal strife, external invasions, and over time, a weakening of its political and economic infrastructure. Though Mali remained a significant power for some decades after Mansa Musa's death, it was never quite the same. The silk routes of the ancient world that had passed through Mali began to shift, and new trade routes emerged, bypassing the empire. But even as the political dominance of Mali waned, the cultural and intellectual legacy of Mansa Musa remained firmly embedded in the region. The libraries, universities, and mosques he built continued to serve as centers of learning for generations, and the rich intellectual tradition he fostered flourished even as the empire crumbled around them. Timbuktu, long considered the jewel of Mali, remained a beacon of Islamic scholarship, attracting scholars from around the world well into the 16th century. Mansa Musa's wealth may have faded from the physical realm, but his influence on the world of Islam and African culture lived on. His efforts to ensure that the Islamic faith took root deeply in the heart of West Africa were realized, with Islam continuing to spread and shape the cultural and religious identity of millions of people across the Sahel and beyond. His establishment of intellectual hubs like Timbuktu laid the groundwork for an enduring African renaissance that would continue in various forms long after his death.
In AW, the end of Mansa Musa's Reiten mirrored the fading of an age.
The era of legendary empires that spanned vast areas of the African continent would eventually give way to new political realities. But Musa's story is a reminder that power and wealth are fleeting. What endures is the legacy of those who leave behind a tangible contribution to society. For Musa, that was not just gold and riches, but a flourishing cultural, spiritual, and intellectual world that continues to inspire us today. As you drift into sleep, think of the quiet streets of Timbuktu, where once there were bustling scholars and the rustling of ancient scrolls, where scholars debated the finer points of Islamic jurisprudence and philosophy. Picture the golden sands of the Sahara, the endless sky stretching above, and the caravan of camels making their slow journey toward Mecca. Think of the trade routes that brought spices and silks, the scent of incense and the sounds of scholarly discussions. This was the world that Mansa Musa created, a world of wealth, knowledge, and spirituality, one that left its mark on the history of both Africa and the wider world. Now, dim the lights, let your body relax, and let these images of ancient Mali and its golden empire fade into the soft rhythm of your breathing. Sleep well, knowing that the echoes of Mansa Musa's grandeur will live on in the history books, and in the quiet moments of your mind, in the peaceful journey of dreams. You begin to feel like this journey wasn't just a pilgrimage. It was a hinge in history.
A turning point for a kingdom, a culture, maybe even a continent.
And still, you're not home yet. The final leg looms, and with it, the promise of mango trees, of laughing griots, of gold, yes, but also of books, architecture, and something harder to define, a legacy.